to make sure.
Hello and welcome into this week's edition of AFMC TV. I'm Michelle Rupp. We're glad you're joining us. Have you ever wondered, what else does the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission do? We know they take care of hunter education and angler education, but there's so much more. Joining me today is Trey Reid from Game and Fish, and you're here to tell us just about the education component alone that Game and Fish is involved in.
There's so much to talk about, Michelle. Okay. You and I were visiting previously, and I was like, wow, where do you want to start? Because I don't think a lot of people realize that. There's such a big component of education that Arkansas Game and Fish Commission does. And of course, as you mentioned, we are educating, hunters. It's mandatory if you were born after 1968 that you have hunter education when you go hunting in Arkansas. But there's so much more to it than that. Another thing I think many people are probably aware of our nature centers, which are these, they're brick and mortar places. They're like almost like a museum where you can go and you can see the aquariums and you can kind of see these exhibits that tell the story of how we manage fish and wildlife in Arkansas. But our education division, we have an entire division of education staff. A lot of these folks are teachers or have degrees in teaching, but there are like 60 people in that division. They staff the nature centers that I talked about, of course, which we have 9 of those around the state, but they do so much more. I mean, we work with schools across the state to implement conservation programming that's aligned with state education curriculum. Okay. We have regional education coordinators that represent regions of the state that go do programming in schools. We do teacher in-service workshops so they can take the lesson plans about conservation and go back and teach that. We have schools come to us to do field trips at some of these education and nature centers that we talked about. We have a shooting sports program, an archery program in the schools. I mean, it really goes on and on. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's talk about the nature centers. I know you mentioned there were 9. That's news to me. I'm familiar with the one in downtown Little Rock, but I didn't realize that there were 9. So where in the state? I guess strategically all over.
Yeah, we've got them all really across the state. The traditional nature centers are in Little Rock, Pine Bluff, Fort Smith, Jonesboro, and our newest is in Northwest Arkansas in Springdale. Okay. Now, I say traditional nature centers because we have for a number of years also had these education centers. They're not really necessarily like a place where you go in and walk around and look at exhibits but we've started calling them all nature centers. So our education centers that we now call nature centers are located in Ponca. We have the Elk Education Center in Boxley Valley there. It's kind of the theme is the elk herd, the reintroduced elk herd in that area. We have one down in Southwest Arkansas outside of Hope, the Grandview Prairie Center. We have one on Cooks Lake over near the White River National Wildlife Refuge, about 20 miles east of Stuttgart. And what is the other one that I'm missing? We'll come back to it. Okay. But there's a lot to keep up with, Michelle. So those education centers have, like the one at Cooks Lake, for instance, it's got like a laboratory. Schools can come there. We do hummingbird banding. We do programs on that.
I've heard of this.
That is a really popular program throughout the summer. But we'll have school groups come over on the bus, and they'll go out and collect bugs in Cooks Lake, bring them back, look at them under a microscope, identify them, and they can learn about water quality that way. So there are so many programs. Oh, Yellville, Crooked Creek Education Center was the one that escaped me at first.
I wouldn't have thought Yellville. Okay.
Yeah. So again, agfc.com, we have a whole education tab that you can click on and learn about a lot of specific programming at each of these centers.
I know you touched on it briefly, some of the other programs that Game and Fish offers, such as the archery and youth shooting sports.
Yeah. Right? So our youth shooting sports program, I think, is about 15 years old now, and archery is a dozen or so years. But if you think about it on the surface, you're going to have shooting programs in schools, but it teaches safe use of firearms. And it's a type of competition that it doesn't matter how tall you are, how high you can jump, how fast you can run. And that goes for the archery too. We have about 10,000 students in Arkansas that participate in the shooting sports program, and many, many more, like probably 50,000 that participate in archery. Now, a lot of that is through the PE classes at their school. Now, they can also form teams and go on to participate in regional and state competitions that the Game and Fish Commission puts on every year. And so we have about, I think, combined about 5,000 or 6,000 students that participate in our state championships in both trap shooting and archery competition every year.
And you can even medal at the Olympics in that.
Well, we all know that we have a young woman from Arkansas, Kaylee Browning, who won a silver medal in the most recent Olympic Games, Summer Olympic Games. And she actually participated in the early stages of our program. Now, she was shooting before we started the program, but she has been a great ambassador for the sport. And we've had many other students go on to participate in Junior Olympic competition and other international competition.
But what a great opportunity that a child could have talent there, and you never know until they're afforded the opportunity to participate and fall in love with it.
And this always comes up, but what I really love going to our state championships every year, whether that's archery or shooting sports, and you have these girls and boys participating side by side, and the girls will shoot better than the boys a lot of times. And, but it goes to the point that, again, it is not about, yes, it requires a lot of skill, and it requires training, and it requires dedication and practice. But, you don't have to be able to run faster than somebody to excel in these sports. And so we hear a lot of stories from principals and administrators at schools that this gives some kids that didn't have an outlet for that kind of competition, that team sport, to get involved with something, and it gives them something that they can really get involved with and enjoy. And
being a hunting state to begin with, it's natural that you would offer something like this, because some of those kids were out in the woods.
They were
participating
born
long before.
With bows and arrows and shotguns in their hands a lot of times.
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about, because these are great programs, but they all cost money. So how are these programs funded?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that. We have, most of this stuff doesn't cost the schools anything. We have a lot of grants that are available to schools. And one thing that I'd really like to tell people about, Michelle, is that there's a big misconception that when Game and Fish wildlife officers write a ticket for a violation, you didn't have your fishing license or your hunting license or whatever the case may be, that money comes back to Game and Fish, but we never see any of that. That all goes into a fund that can only be used for education programs, and it goes back to the county where the fine was assessed. So every year, I think this year it was somewhere around $750,000, like $750,000 that was available. The grants are administered through the Division of Rural Services, State of Arkansas Division of Rural Services, and in each county there's X number of dollars that are available, and these schools can apply for these grants if they want to start a shooting sports program. They can buy clays, they can buy a trap throwing machine, they can buy the bows and arrows and the targets. If they want to start a schoolyard habitat project, that's a program we didn't even talk about, schoolyard habitat, where they can learn about certain plants that are good for pollinators, which we all need for our agriculture industry in Arkansas, to grow vegetables in our garden, you name it. They can be used for all these different educational purposes. So most of these programs don't cost the school anything. You can even use it to put diesel in the school bus to go on a field trip to one of our nature centers. So it's a really, really wide array of uses for when I say educational purposes. And unfortunately, Michelle, a lot of this grant money goes unclaimed every year.
Is it because there's just not interest, or maybe the schools don't know it's available?
I think it's an awareness issue, and I go on programs like yours and other TV shows, every year to tell people about this. But I think, it's out there. And so thank you for the opportunity to talk about it, because it's, you could say, well, why does the Game and Fish even embark on these educational programs? Like, what is that? That's not necessarily hunting and fishing. But our view on it is if we can connect people to nature, whether that's with a shotgun to hunt ducks or a rifle to hunt deer or a bow and arrow to hunt deer or put a fishing pole in their hands, that's great. But so many other people don't. They're just not hunters and anglers. They don't necessarily have an interest in that. But if we can connect them to the natural world, like paddling a canoe or kayak, like bird watching, whatever the case may be, it's going to foster this sense of environmental stewardship. It's going to make them want to take care. And if we don't have, as we're becoming a more urban and technology dependent sort of society, and let's face it, that's happening, we're losing these kind of connections that we've historically had as humans and as Arkansans to the natural world. And if we can we've got to keep those connections alive, and education is the way that we think is a good way to do that. And so if these people care and can appreciate this, we're going to have folks in the future to be able to take care of it.
And how great to be able to get some of these tools into city slickers' hands in some of the city schools who maybe they've not been exposed. Maybe they don't come from a family background of hunters or anglers or anything like that. And now they're getting this little taste, and you never know what switch that might flip in them.
You're absolutely right. And we have found there's a lot of research out there. And this sort of drift away from nature is not like, we're pretty lucky in Arkansas because we are a rural state. Yes. We've got a lot of wonderful wild spaces, but this is something that's happening across the country. There's been a lot of research into it. And one of the reasons that people don't necessarily take to these outdoor sports is they didn't grow up in a household that did it. They didn't have a mentor that did it. And that's one of the challenges of some of these programs is, hunting, angling, and some of these other outdoor things. I can't just teach a class of 50 people how to do it. It's kind of one-on-one or a 1-to-2, 1-to-3. It's sort of, you need to have a small group. So it's hard to scale up. But that's one of the things we're trying to do through some of these programs. And, even at our nature centers, we talked about the things they do, like, you can go in and look at the fish and see the exhibits. But they do programming all the time where you can take like a crappie fishing 101 seminar, or learn how to catfish, or learn how to deer hunt. These classes are going on all the time, all over the state. Like I said, we've got 9 locations. We even do some virtual instruction through Zoom and things like that. So if you want to learn about this stuff, there's a way to do it.
That's awesome. Well, and it can all be found. Give us the website.
agfc.com. And we have a wonderful new calendar tool, an events calendar. You can put in events that are within a certain mileage from where you live, or different filters you can put on to search, like hunting, fishing, paddling, sports, whatever the case may be. And you'll get a whole list of different opportunities to learn about this stuff.
Fantastic. All right, Trey, thank you so much for coming in today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Telling us all the things about game and fish.
Yeah, there is so much out there. I wish we could do this for an hour and not cover everything.
We absolutely could. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next week for more AFMC TV.